It is getting a bit embarrassing, the fact that I am more than willing to use any and all opportunities to rave about Neverwinter Nights whenever the topic allows for it, even in the slightest. And I do think that I have enough self-awareness to admit that it is nostalgia, at least to an extent. That game was one of my very first experiences of living through a story in such a different way. Doing so through reading was a staple at that point, but games were not, and Neverwinter Nights was for a long time the only one that I had access to. And so I've played through it so many times before even starting to consider other aspects of storytelling, and especially the way that I do now. And this one almost 25 years old game simply fulfills so many of my requirements. Either my tastes completely evolved based on it, but I do not think that is the case, considering the fact that before going through it for the initial batch of videos on this channel, I have not really thought about it. Oh well, I will give it a thought or two in my spare time. But meanwhile, back to the protagonist of role playing video games question. And to sum it up, the protagonist of Neverwinter Nights starts low, is good at his job, is competent, is asked for help, but is not on a leash and has choices. Now, for the second game, during its prologue, the protagonist wins the Harvest Cup, proving that within his small world of his one village, he is competent, he is the champion, and so that ticks the box of being capable. Then an ambush happens, and one of his companions, a female mage, jumps into a confrontation she's not ready for and pays the price for that, which is a rather interesting choice. Surprising, to be honest. Unfortunately, right from the very beginning, that game features one of the all-knowing mentor archetypes who is fully aware of what is happening but cannot, will not, refuses to tell the protagonist. And contrary to Hadroline from the first game, who has plenty of legitimate reasons to not divulge everything to the playable character, in this game, the mentor is actually the protagonist's foster father. And so instead of telling him everything to increase his odds of survival, he just sends his ward away with some cryptic messages. And honestly, the protagonist has very little agency over the direction the story is evolving in. And considering the first entry in the series, well, that had been made by a different studio before Obsidian took over, and well, it does tick some of the boxes when it comes to that protagonist, him being capable to an extent. It falls short for me in other areas, and well, the foster father, teacher, mentor archetype is simply not my thing. Another example of the hatchling part of the story done in a way that I can enjoy would be Conan, him storming Vanarium alongside the rest of the warriors of Cimmeria when he was barely 15, then choosing for himself what to do afterwards instead of staying back in his home with his father, picking up a blacksmithing and slowly fading into obscurity. He chooses to venture forth into the unknown with very little experience, but a strong body and a mind willing to learn, and he is capable, yet very inexperienced, and that shows. Obviously, he is not a protagonist of a video game, at least not initially, but you get the point. And in the next video I will finally get to my point and the reason why I have started talking about this topic again. But for now, the plot thickens on the side of the Rapidaros. They are trapped in a cave due to a flash flood, and the situation is not exactly great. And so, after an uneventful yet restless night, the next course of action is to properly explore the cave, hopefully finding another way out. The boys only know that it's the morning thanks to their watches, because the night down there is pretty much permanent. But despite the darkness and how one might want to do everything in their power to dispel it, at least to an extent, they have to really conserve their sources of lighting. They have some candles, but without knowing for how long they might be stuck in there, they can only use one, and truly sparingly. And Yarka is the one carrying the flame. As they are carefully climbing upwards, he notices that the flame is leaning in one direction, indicating a draft, maybe a simple opening, but also a possibility of another entrance. Speedy then notices another cave within a cave and asks someone else to investigate since he is currently busy. Mirek calms him down that for now they will try to find the source of that draft, but then the little scaredy cat, as he calls him, will have to go there himself. Then they find a sort of a chimney that Yindra climbs, only to find a tiny opening up there at the end of it, unfortunately not fit for a person to squeeze through, but at least they know that they will have enough air. And Indra got to see the sunlight at least for a while. Afterwards, they go back to that little side cave. It is Yarka, equipped with that candle, who enters first, finding out that it leads to this small opening, and it appears that there are even some papers indicating some previous guests to this cave. When everyone else arrives, they gather around those, which turned out to be some papers torn out of a notebook, and they tell a tale of an explorer in a similar situation as they find themselves in right now. A storm with a flood blocking the entrance. Nobody knew that the writer was there. His screams for help were left unheard. Apparently he slept on a bed made of moss, but his supplies were dwindling and so was his hope for rescue. He then leaves his name for the potential finder of this diary, hoping that he or she will be willing to inform those he had left behind. It must have been written a long time ago since the paper had time to turn all yellow. They do search the rest of the area but find nothing, no remains. Two options left: either the writer or well, his remains lie in some other side cave undiscovered, or he had managed to escape successfully and was able to fulfill his own final wishes. Back at their camp, Speedy is losing his nerves. firmly proclaiming his intentions to eat some of his patties. He does get stopped by Mirag, who then firmly establishes rations. No one should eat without the knowledge of others, and that they will pool all their resources together without knowing for how long they might be stuck here. They will have to be really careful. Also, as customary, Speedy maybe even intentionally messes the word. Instead of patty, calls them peaties. And so, with deep regret and misery, he gives them his final goodbyes, almost sings them a requiem, and then pulls them together with the rest of the club. There's some tin cans, bread, salami, and so on there. Sausages as well. Indra jokingly rebukes him, telling him to stop crying, and even tries to fix Speedy's erroneous spelling to no avail, obviously. Then, when they are eating, Redcap asks Speedy what is he doing, holding one of his hands to his eye curled into an incomplete fist, and Speedy displaying his ability to stay afloat, to retain his ability to joke even in the toughest of situations, hoping to improve the mood of himself and those around him. He claims that he has procured for himself a makeshift microscope to even be able to see his portion of the food, and that's the chapter, and also the video. Next time, more of the same.